Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope we're ready for the first speaking session of the day. Thankfully, our first speaker is familiar with speaking. He's a TED speaker and a public speaker, had over 15 global speaking engagements, including the PM for Ukraine Charity Conference. As the first speaker of today, we are hosting Vice President of PMI Zambia chapter, Billy Mwape. He is a passionate agile and leadership coach with over 18 years of ICT and leadership experience in the mining and banking sectors. He is giving back to his community through a junior CEO program aimed at equipping boys and girls in Zambia with leadership, techpreneurship, aquaculture, AI, robotics, agile, and design thinking skills. Before I give the word to Mr. Mwape, I would like to remind that you will see a QR code for donation on your screen. Please don't forget to donate to support earthquake victims. So, please welcome Mr. Billy Mwape. How are you?
I'm great, fine. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We're so nice. We appreciate the hosting you. You will give a presentation and the name of the subject, leadership, resilient leadership. Am I true?
That is
Is
correct.
it? It is an interesting word you chose, leadership. You will explain it, but I'm looking forward to hear about it. Hear about resilient leadership. So, stage is yours, Billy Mwape.
Thank you. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Nelson Mandela. Falling in life is inevitable. We all have fallen at some point, whether big or small. And sometimes, depending on the fall, you could actually incur a cut, deep or shallow. In an instance where you get a deep cut, you could potentially bleed to death because blood is such an important element to our sustainability as human beings. And I know most of you on this call, from wherever you're joining us from, you at some point tripped over when you were younger, maybe even now, and you cut yourself. And miraculously, the wound closed itself. A lot of resilience demonstrated by this body. What actually happens for blood to clot and protect or cover the wound is something that I want to talk about very quickly here and see where it takes us. So blood is 45% composed of red blood cells. And red blood cells help with the circulation of oxygen to the vital organs that keep us going and breathing on a daily basis. We also have the white blood cells in there. And most of you remember from your biology that they help to fight disease. And we also have platelets in there. Here's a fascinating part. The 55% of the blood composition is plasma, a fluid. And 90% of plasma is water. This is a medium through which these vital elements are transported around the body. And whenever you have a cut, something fascinating happens. The body magically reacts to that wound. The body becomes agile. The body becomes resilient to protect itself. And I would like to break this down into 3 major steps. The first step is what I'm coining as the self-regulation stage. The second stage is internal reinforcement, and the third is external reinforcement. So what really happens in the self-regulation stage? Once the skin is cut, there is a component called collage. The collage get exposed and it instantly attracts the platelets to go to the area of the wound. So the platelets stick together to cover the area and create a barrier to prevent excessive bleeding, which could potentially lead to death. Interesting. Some of the lessons that we can learn from here. The bleeding, like in my title, symbolizes traumatic events, adversaries that we face on a daily basis, and ongoing stresses. And we could learn a lot from the agility and the resilience of the body as leaders, leading project teams or other community functions that we are leading in. A few lessons that we pick from here is that notice how when the skin is cut, there is exposure of the collage, which attracts the platelets to come and stick together at a point of a wound to prevent further bleeding because it creates that barrier. We pick communication there. In times of a crisis, in times of a wound, communication becomes very critical. Sticking together becomes priority number one over and above deliverables and milestones that you may have. People are grieving. People are going through different situations. And so the first reaction you want to have is to engage people. They say people go where they feel welcomed and stay where they feel connected. And what a time for you to cultivate proper connection and genuine bonds within your teams than a time when you're undergoing adversaries. We can learn a lot from this coagulation of the platelets around the wound as a first response. But this flag is not strong enough, right? It could potentially be broken and you could still bleed. So what the body does then, the second part is it releases a protein known as fibrinogen. So this is the second stage now, which is the internal reinforcement. Fibrinogen then gets attracted to the same area of the wound where we have the platelets, remember, and it forms a mesh. The interesting lesson I want us to learn from here is that fibrinogen, once exposed to the external environment, it gets in touch with chemicals around it and becomes sticky, right? It changes the attribute. It becomes sticky to attract more red blood cells and platelets to form a stronger mesh around the area of a wound. This is to provide a reinforced protection over the top to completely prevent further oozing of the blood, which could potentially lead to death. What can we pick as leaders from there? I take fibrinogen as situational leadership. In times of a crisis, such as this one that we've come to, we need to be very agile and highly adaptive as leaders. And most importantly, we need to be situational leaders. Nobody goes to school to become a resilient leader. It's very difficult to even just pick up a book and begin to read about resilient leadership because resilient leadership is built from experiences. Resilient leadership is built from adversaries. Just like they say, kites never fly with the wind, they fly against the wind. And it reminds me of what my father told me long time ago, may his soul rest in peace, when I was younger. He told me a fascinating story about an eagle. When there's a storm, you see other birds run, they fly away and get into the branches, into the safety zones. But what the eagle does is very different. It has courage to confront the storm. It flies right into the storm, and it uses the current of the storm to fly above the storm. Sounds spectacular, right? But not easy when you're in the storm, because there's a lot of pain that goes on. But at the end of the day, you cultivate the resilience muscle. Let's get back to fibrinogen. Fibrinogen changes its attributes and characteristics when it's exposed to external chemicals. External chemicals are a symbol of the surrounding, which we excruciatingly do not have control over every time. Things happen to us, things we never planned for, things we never anticipated. But the option that we have as human beings is a resilience. It's a resilience to respond to such calamities. It's a resilience that I remember we showed during World War One. It's a resilience I remember we showed during World War Two. It's a resilience I vividly remember we demonstrated when COVID-19 hit us. I was down with COVID. I almost died. My entire family got COVID. But through it all, we kept believing. We kept hoping. Just like they say, when you fall down, for as long as you can turn around and look up, then you can definitely get up. We got up from there. We had many lessons that we picked from there. Here we are today in the new normal. And here we are today collaborating in solidarity over this virtual platform. This is what calamity can do to people, but this is what resilience can actually bring out of people. Situational leadership is very critical when you are going through a calamity. You are leading a team. You could be in an area that is torn by earthquake. You could be running a project which has actually affected team members who are staying in areas that are affected by this earthquake. It changes the entire dynamic of leadership. It is not your usual KPI. Your focus is now on people. You could potentially put a hold on a project because it's not viable anymore, but you can never put a hold on people. You need to check up on people. You need to find out how they're doing. You need to keep the momentum because people always come first in times of adversary. The characteristic of fibrinogen changes to become sticky when it's exposed to the external chemicals. Just as the fibrinogen changes its characteristics, you have to change your characteristic as a leader. You have to be highly adaptable. And in changing your characteristic is that you shield your team from exposure, external exposure. You shield your team from external stakeholders, external people that are involved or could be involved in your project. You take care of that type of stakeholder engagement whilst you put the team together. Sticky it is. You put the team together. And in sticking together, it's you exercising empathy. Very critical. In sticking together, it's you assessing the strengths of your people, the limits to which they can go, and understanding what their weaknesses are. And then looking around your team, finding ways and synergies where you can actually have the strengths complement the weaknesses and keep moving as a team. That is your role as a leader. And that is leadership indeed. I would just like to introduce you to one quick model that I always use when I find myself in a difficult situation. Most of you who've watched my TED Talk, it's about our son who was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. He was paralyzed the entire left side. And we lost hope in the early days. We didn't know what to do. And for those of you who've watched the TED Talk, you will see how we implemented agile principles and values to actually build a team around him to help him to get where he is today. I can say it with a smile today that this boy who was told that he was never going to sit, that he was never going to walk, he now runs on a scooter. He now plays soccer with me. The journey still continues, but the lesson that I want you to pick from here is how highly adaptable we became when this situation happened to us. An important model I would share with you is the ETC. The E stands for emotion. Whenever you find yourself in a situation where anxiety goes up because your internal clock does not align with the external clock, and so you get anxious, you don't know what tomorrow brings, I would like you to take a step behind and identify the emotion. What emotion are you going on? What emotion are you experiencing right now? And we could pick this in kids. Why do kids throw tantrums? It's because they usually fail to understand the emotions they're going through. But when you ask them, Billy, are you angry? Billy say, no, daddy. Billy, are you hungry? No, daddy. Billy, do you feel frustrated? Yes, daddy. You can clearly see the baby becoming calm because you've touched the right emotion. You name it to tame it. Whatever you may be going through, when you're leading under difficult situations, you have to be honest to yourself. You have to be transparent. You have to first identify the right and correct emotions that you're going through. After you've identified the emotions, you can now move to the T part. The T is for the truths. What's the truth around the situation? The truth is that I have no control over this project anymore. I cannot continue leading it because external circumstances do not allow me to do so. What's the truth? The truth is, I have the power to actually show leadership, to build the morale in people and bring them together. And how do I do that? I can at least communicate with people. I can at least take part in a bigger cause such as this one and donate something to help victims of the earthquake. These are the truths. You pick the truths. And now the last part, which is the C. Remember, it was ETC, emotion, truths around the situation, and now choices. What choice do I have? Do I curl back in a corner and wait for doomsday? Or do I stand up and rise up from the ashes? Do I participate in any event that's going on in helping the victims of this earthquake or other adversaries that people are going through around the world? The power lies in the choices that we make. When we drop in an ocean, whether we sink or we swim, it's a choice that we make. Similarly to adversaries, when we are faced with difficult situations in our teams, one thing that I do know is that we usually do not have control over things that happen to us, but we usually have a choice on how we respond. And the choice that you have as a leader is to be highly adaptable. The choice that you have as a leader is to be highly empathetic. Let me move to the last stage, which is external reinforcement. And most of you know, some of the bleeding cannot be curbed by the internal mechanisms, which is the coagulation, the one I talked about in the first place, where the platelets come, the fibrinogen come. Some of the dips are so deep, the cuts are so deep, and you will need an external person to help. You will need someone to apply pressure. For some of you who've done first aid, you know that the first thing you do to manage a bleeding site is that you apply pressure on a bleeding place because you want it outside so that the internal mechanism can take place and the coagulation can happen, prevent the wound from opening up and from bleeding. Or you can tie a bandage around that. What can we learn from that? Very critical lessons that we pick from there. That in today's world, it's no longer about having all the answers up front. It's about knowing where to get the answers whenever you need them. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to raise your hand and say, I don't know what to do here. Can somebody help me? There's so many people who've gone ahead. who've gone through different experiences in leadership, in project management, and these are our lessons that we can pick from. This is a greater asset to all of us. Shouting for help. Vulnerability in leadership is not a weakness. Vulnerability is actually a cornerstone for resilient leadership. You want to be okay, to be uncomfortable and say, I am vulnerable, I need help over here. I am vulnerable, I need external pressure applied on my wound so that it allows for the internal mechanisms to take place. How many of you on this call have asked for help? How many of you on this call are willing to ask for help, not just from external, even from your team members? Because remember, the reason why we build diverse teams is that we bring to the table different strengths. We bring to the table different capabilities. And it's you as a leader to understand your arsenal. It's you as a leader to understand which gun to pick at what particular time. Your team is your everything in times of adversity. You want to be inclusive as a leader. Make sure that you don't just bring people to the table, allow them to speak up, allow them to contribute with the uniqueness that they bring to the table. And eventually, you're going to attain a sense of belongingness. Where there is hope, there is definitely a guarantee that one day people will rise from the ashes. It may be gloomy right now. It may be difficult right now dealing with a difficult situation. But one thing we can never sleep on is staying together. One thing we can never sleep on is indeed sticking together. So very quickly, how do you deal with anxiety and how do we cultivate this sort of resilient leadership in us? Just like I said, using an example of an eagle, you face it. Face the storm heads on. Facing it, FACE. And the F is for focusing on priorities as a leader. What are your priorities when things change in this VUCA world? You have uncertainties. What are your priorities? And the very thing I will tell you very quickly is that your priority is people. Communicate with people. Engage in problem solving. Engage in strategic collaboration. Engage in strategic thinking with your people. Secondly, be agile and highly adaptable. Things change and you have to adapt because you may just be run over by event. And the C, I can never overemphasize communication, 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 over communicate. And the last E in the face is empathy. Feel the pain of other people, step in their shoes, know how they're feeling, and then find ways within which you can help each other. Remember, it's no longer about milestones right now. Your priority is life. Your priority is people. Be a people leader. Resilience lies in you engaging your people on a team. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising whenever we fall. And in your rising, remember to be compassionate, to walk in other people's shoes, to walk in your team members' shoes. In rising, remember never to lose sight of your goal. Keep moving, keep going forward. It gets better. Ever failed, ever tried, no matter. Try again, fail again, fail better, fail forward. In rising, remember to celebrate the small victories because it is in the small victories that we build ourselves going towards our recovery process. In rising, remember to put people first. Thank you very much. And at this moment, I'll take some questions if you have some.
Uh, we would like to thank you, Billy. It was powerful speech. Actually, I have many questions, but I have to save them because audience ask many questions. One of them is coming. What power skills does one need to lead in difficult times?
Thank you so much. Interesting that we talk about power skills. Previously, there was a lot of focus on technical skills, the expert power that we have. But as we move on, as we evolve, we realize that power skills, formerly known as soft skills, are now taking a center stage for any type of prolific leadership, and most importantly, resilient leadership. And the four power skills that off my head are the ones that we actually have on our new triangle. We know that communication is one of them. I can't overemphasize this. I spoke about communication through and through. And then there is a problem solving skill. It's very important. Focus on the solution and not on the problem. It's very important not to enlarge the problem before you, because it excretes. There's actually a biological explanation that you generate the stress hormones in you, and they just stress you and they block. What you want to focus on are the solutions. So the problem solving, when you focus on the solutions, you excrete what is called as dopamine. It gives you the excitement and it helps you to push forward. And that actually helps never quit whenever you're going through a difficult situation. And number three, it's strategic collaboration. Collaborate with strategic people. So there's a lot of interpersonal skills coming into play that really helps you when you're dealing with difficult situations. And the final one is actually strategic thinking. What is your strategy around the situation that you are in? So you know that if we keep pushing this project, we keep pushing for deliverables, when you all know that people are grappling with bigger issues and their first priority is to survive. So you need to be very strategic to put on hold the project and focus on people, so that at the end of the day you don't lose both. You don't lose people and you don't lose the project. So I think strategic thinking becomes very, very critical. So those are the four things: communication, strategic collaboration, problem solving, and also strategic thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. And another question is coming. Are resilient leaders born or made? I think it's very interesting question. What do you think about it, Billy?
It's very interesting. Hey, so when we say, I'll give an example. I don't know how well you know Africa. There was a king in Southern Africa called Shaka. He conquered many kingdoms, and he came up with different strategies of fighting in war, cow horn formation. He changed the tools, the weapons that they were using. So Shaka grew up as a small boy, but then he became a warrior when he was a grown-up person, right? So whenever someone asks me that question, and if I think of a leader being born, I actually think of a baby, coming out of a womb with a gun or with a spear, and that's ridiculous, right? It never works like people have to grow through life, go through certain encounters for them to get shaped in a way that they become today. So my answer to that is that resilient leaders are born to be made. We are made by circumstances that we encounter along the way. We build this muscle by confronting the problems that we face with agility and being highly adaptable, being decisive and making the right choices. This is what builds resilient leadership. So for me, resilient leaders are born to be made.
Thank you. And I see many good comments on you. You have fans. And I would like to explain that you're a TED speaker. If someone would like to listen or learn more about you, they can go social media. Maybe you can give this information. So one other question is coming, and yeah, we just on the chat box you can also see the link of the TED talk of Billy. Is it easy to quit when things get dull? What are some realistic coping mechanisms?
Interesting question. Quitting is usually easy when you're overcome by challenges around you. I'll be very honest with you. I've quit before in my life because I was overcome by the challenges around me. But I think the biggest question is, why do we quit? Is there a science behind quitting? And yes, there is. And it's what I explained. Let's take, for example, a marathon runner. The difference between one who starts the marathon and ends it, and the one who actually stops halfway, is in the way they react and the way they think. So the one who actually completes the marathon has every kilometer or every mile in their head. So they keep going, they keep saying, just one more mile, or just one more kilometer, just one more mile, or just one more kilometer. And you could potentially relate this to the agile principles of iterations or sprints if you are talking agile, right? So those sprints help us achieve certain goals or minimum business increments very quickly, and they give us value very quickly. So that gives us a satisfaction. There's value coming to the business, there's value coming to a team, and it gives you more propensity to actually attain more goals or more minimum business increments in the next iterations. So it is that kind of psychological setup that helps you to keep going, and eventually you find that within different iterations you manage to achieve the bigger objectives. But then if you have the entire 1000 miles in your head, immediately what gets released in your body is your stress hormone, and your body just reacts to that. You begin to think of quitting because you have this gigantic mountain ahead of you which you can't climb, right? But then if you're thinking, let me climb one step at a time and I will celebrate every little step that I take, that become realistic in actually overcoming the mountain before you. So taking little chunks and celebrating the little milestones on your way against some giant that is standing before you becomes very critical in never quitting. So that would be my answer, I think, from a realistic point of view on how you handle difficult situations or a mountain before you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We can have other questions also. Yeah, short but deep question. Why good is hard?
Why?
Good, good is hard.
Why good is hard? That's a
Hard,
very
yeah.
deep question, right? I think from my
Yeah.
own perspective, I think good is hard because we are usually never empathetic. We are usually self centered. We are usually selfish, and we look out for ourselves, right? So the moment I step out of my shoes and get in your world, then I begin to see what you're seeing. Then I begin to empathize. Then I begin to feel your pain. Then I begin to think larger than my life. So acting in a good way becomes easy for me because I'm able to get off my shoes. Some people's pride that they never consider taking them off to put on other people's shoes. And you know what? We are only in this entire universe. And I'll remind you that nothing was built for itself. Not a pressing iron, not this technology, nothing serves itself. Everything was built to serve the next thing. Pressing iron was built to serve you to press some clothes, right? Technology was built to serve us, not to serve itself, right? The data that we get, the analysis and everything. So at the end of the day, when you realize that you are smaller in this bigger picture and your role is not to save yourself but to serve the next person, then you get the gist of life, and you get the gist of things, that being good now will become natural because you are able to get off your shoes and get in another person's shoe to understand their pain, to understand what they're seeing, to understand and also celebrate their victory. Because compassion is not just feeling for other people's adversaries, it's also celebrating their victories because you're now becoming larger than life. So, in a nutshell, I think that's why good is hard. It's because we are usually selfish and we never just get off our shoes to try other people's shoes.
Yeah, as a enthusiast of self development, I quote many important points you gave. Thank you, and there are also good compliments. I would like to pass it to you. Thank you, Billy. Very deep and inspiring, and this great and informative presentation. Answers are very explanatory. So thank you for all of them. Uh, and yeah, you can see the TED talk of Billy on the screen, and there's a link and in the chat box. So I can maybe take two questions more. We have 5 minutes. Uh, One of them I'm waiting from my friends, or I can ask my questions. It is also possible. I have many. So let me ask you that. I am also a member of many NGOs, and I nowadays I hear leadership is changing, and you just underlined that thing, resilient leadership, and I also hear change makers, and PMI Project Management Institute also focused that topic. Can you please describe about the modern leadership, new form of leadership and change makers? What do you think about these topics?
Thank you so much. So the leadership of today and change maker, and I think we need to be very clear with the change makers. Change makers are not all project managers, and we need to understand that. A change maker is any person who's striving to better their communities. And it doesn't matter the scale at which you are impacting on your community. It could be impacting on 2 children. It could be helping just one person. But in the large scheme of things, like I said, you're only a dot in this universe, you become a change maker. So, but what does it take for you to be a change maker? So it also just rolls back to the power skills that I talked about. Are you a problem solver? Are you focusing on problems or solutions? What kind of solutions can we build within our context? Because the type of challenges that I am facing here in Africa, in Zambia, could be totally different from the type of challenges that we are facing, right? So we have values, we have principles that we adhere to, which we share as leaders. But the greatest power in modern leadership lies in you contextualizing the solutions to the unique challenges that you are facing in your communities. So we could all digest maybe the PM Book 7, we could talk about agility, we could talk about iterations, but they will remain academic if we can't actually apply them in real life. So I think the intelligent leader today, the change maker today, is one who demystifies the complexities of these things that we study, in our PhDs, in our PMPs, and all our certifications, to actually translate to actual impact on the ground, to actually translate to imparting or impacting on a life on the ground. I think for me, that means change making. And that is what leadership is calling for now, is for people to simplify these complex principles and philosophies into practical, actionable items that we can actually take to our community and impact on them. So for me, I think that's transformational leadership. It's also change making, and you don't need to be a project manager for you to be a change maker.
Oh, thank you so much. We need leaders and change makers nowadays, stronger than before. It is our last minute, and I would like to hear from you about this earthquake disaster and disasters. Leading is also so important in that times. From your country, you also have hard life conditions. So just a few sentences, and we are closing our session. So thank you again, Billy. After you, we will go to break.
Thank you so much. So just one word for me. I don't even want to overcomplicate things. People are going through different stresses. People are going through difficult situations. Remember to have a heart. Thank you.